Very good afternoon to one and all. A warm welcome to all the participants, those who have joined. We'll be definitely joined by a few more in some time. And without wasting any time, we would like to begin in a minute. Would that be fine, Srilekha ma'am?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I would just request all of you to put your mics, keep your mics on muted mode, and be very attentive to the session. I'm sure your takeaways would be huge and would be something which would keep uh, you rooted to environment and environmental communication for a long time. So, thank you so much for all those who have joined on time. Keeping and valuing your time will begin right away. So, I'll take a quote by Barack Obama to begin with. We are the first generation to feel the effect of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it. When it comes to climate change, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. So nicely put. And this is a very indigenous effort taken by the Bhopal School of Social Sciences because our motto stands for towards a better world. And to keep that motto always alive, this is something which keeps us moving. And today I'm joined by a very dear friend of mine, Srilekha Koparambil. I hope Srilekha I pronounced it right.
You did, you did.
Yeah. So she has over 20 years of experience in the field of education. She majored in English language and literature, after which she pursued PGCTE at English and Foreign Language University, Hyderabad. Currently, she is assistant professor English at Presidency University. She has always pursued her interest in public speaking, theater, creative writing, and teacher training. She writes at the blog www.adhyapika.co.in, which deals with everything mundane to her experiences in the world of teaching. She believes strongly in the value of continuous learning and is currently pursuing PhD in environmental communication. So I believe all of you got a clue why she is here as a speaker, because she has done in-depth research in the topic of environmental communication. And this is something which the millennials should begin with. So climate change is not something is of a distant reality, or it may happen in US or Africa. It may not affect us in India. You can see the very impact of it in the Uttarakhand landslides and the furious rains we had over intense rains in Kerala and Uttarakhand. Um, so this communication should keep us going. Continuing with Srilekha's profile, she believes strongly in the value of continuous learning and is currently pursuing PhD in environmental communication. As a teacher and trainer, she believes in making impactful classroom experiences. Uh, and she has published a lot of books to her credit. The first one is on I'm missing that. Her articles on entrepreneurs have been published in the Better India. She was a panelist at the Valley of World's International Literary Festival at Dehradun in 2017. To explore and grow and grow and pursue happiness is her mantra in life, which is very evident from with her beautiful smile. She brought out her first book this year titled An Asur World and looks forward to writing more and more. And I'm very happy to have all the environmental enthusiasts. And very specially, I would like to welcome Dr. Lokendra Thakkar here from EPCO. He's the director at Environmental Protection and Coordination Organization at Bhopal. Thank you so much, sir, for being here. Your very presence actually motivates us that we are taking the right course of path, and thank you. Your presence always motivates us, and would like to have you more in such events. So without any further ado, a big warm welcome to Ma'am Srilekha. This is on behalf of the Internal Quality Assurance Cell at the Bhopal School of Social Sciences, jointly hosted by the Department of Education and the Department of Commerce. So on behalf of Dr. Sheba Joseph, our IQAC coordinator, and Dr. Gitanjali Srivastav, I, Dr. Sheena Thomas, extend a warm welcome to you, ma'am, and to all my dear participants. A happy learning, and the stage is all yours, ma'am.
Thank you so much, dear Sheena. I have no words to express my gratitude for this wonderful introduction that you have shared, and I'm very glad to be with all of you today. Before I begin on environmental communication, I must tell you that I'm a student of English language and literature who decided to study applied language, that is in environmental communication, because of my interest in nature, interest in environment, and my concern, a personal observation that environment is often neglected, misused, abused, and what can be done about it. So, with that context and with the quote from Rachel Carson, I'll start. I'll just share my PPT at this point. One of the seminal works in terms of environmental communication is that of Rachel Carson, and her work, Silent Spring, was published in the year 1962. Let me quote her here. The more clearly we can focus our attention to the wonders and realities of the universe about us, the less taste we shall have for destruction. So, what Rachel Carson intended in that seminal work in 1962, which came out, which is called The Silent Spring, was to create in her readers an awe, a sense of wonderment towards nature. So, in this context, my interest in literature related to nature has been also there, and I recently read A Secret Garden, a beautiful book intended for children about the benefits of nature. If you look around, I'm sure you will find a lot that nature does for you, and we are just one among the many that cohabit nature. Let me get to environmental communication and an insight into indigenous environmental friendly practices, which I believe should be given more credit and more room for discussion and debate. Now, what is environmental communication? Environmental communication is communication about anything that is environmentally related. It could be anti environmental protests to pro environmental activism to climate justice to climate change to everything, and policy making comes under the huge umbrella of environmental communication. Therefore, it is a lay activity as much as it is a scientific discipline. So, this is an intersection between psychology, sociology, political science, and environmental studies. Now, what is the purpose of communication in the context of environment? We use communication to do things. We use communication to get action done, to organize, to argue, to express, negotiate. And it also helps us to create a sense, that is, meaning making of what is around us. Let me give you an example of how the sense making has changed over a few years. The way we discuss wilderness, let us understand what is wilderness to us. Wilderness is anything that is wild around us. From the earliest times or beginnings of industrialization, the wilderness was also always seen as something to be conquered. So you have conquering nature, taming nature, right? So taming the wildlife. So this is the kind of language we used in general until the climate change has forced us to change our perception. Therefore, environmental communication and the communication bit of it helps us to shape our perception about nature, about environment, and our relationship with it. It also helps us to mediate and negotiate among different voices about environment, make decisions about what is my connection to environment. So that is where it comes to. The way we communicate with one another about environment does actually shape our behavior to it. So communication is symbolic action. It is what determines our attitude. It also decides how we discuss communication in the social sphere, in the community space, in education, and in various other areas. Now, I mentioned Rachel Carson, who's a marine biologist, who was a marine biologist and has engraved her name to immortality with her contribution to the space of environment. Sometime in 1920s onwards in America, the indiscriminate use of pesticides was promoted by the governments. At that time, Rachel Carson, who was a marine biologist, chanced upon a letter written by her friend to the Boston Herald. What did the friend write about? The friend wrote about how the indiscriminate use of DDT was killing the birds, the bees were disappearing, and this friend of hers noticed and wrote a letter to Boston Herald. Taking this as a cue, Rachel Carson started her studies. Initially, it was a project she had with other colleagues. Later, it became a personal project for her. She noticed that it was not just herself, there were others who were noticing the disastrous effect of extensive use and of pesticides and other chemicals upon the environment. She studied, she collated her studies and put forth this book, Silent Spring, which received at that time protests and such shaming of Rachel Carson as a person to the point that she was called a spinster who has no family and therefore she is against agriculture. Because if you see this slide, you will understand why. At that time, the government itself was promoting DDT as something that is nature friendly, environment friendly, and you can see what this ad says. So you can imagine the kind of fire that kicked up, the storm that kicked up through Rachel Carson's revelations, which sort of, though she had friends across the spectrum in the among the media and the policy makers, still she faced a lot of vilification, and it is only later because Silent Spring has continued to be one of the best sellers, and therefore she is recognized increasingly as a leading voice in environmental communication and the growing influence of environmentalism across the world. I'll move on to other influences from the West. So here I have a few names. One is James Moore. James Moore lived in and around Yosemite Valley. He did not live, he spent some considerable time in that area. And because he spent time among Yosemite Valley is a sanctuary where he spent a lot of time as a young man, and which shaped his liking or his introspection towards nature. Therefore, James Moore brought out some books like The Yosemite Valley and Our National Parks, My First Summer in Syria, Xanita, A Tale of Two Semite, and so on. But he has been a leading voice who has contributed to shaping the American or the Western imagination towards environment. In the middle, this wonderful picture that you see is of Henry David Thoreau. So any student of philosophy will know that Thoreau was a leading voice in naturalism, who spoke for nature, who spoke for trees, and his seminal work, Walden, was a great influence upon the Western environmentalism. So is James Fraser, the Scottish gentleman whose book, The Golden Bough, looked at the trees and the nature and the environment and how it affected human thinking. So it was not one person, one thing. So environmental communication came out of a sort of an interdisciplinary potpourri. where different thoughts from science, opposition, activism, everything together shaped the birth of this discipline, which is called environmental communication, which is therefore an intersection between philosophy, anthropology, sociology, environmental studies, and communication. Now, here I take you to a small story, not exactly story, so something that happened. I moved from Yosemite Valley to Yellowstone Natural Park. So, to the right on your slide, you see the beautiful Yellowstone Natural Park, one of the first commissioned in America, and it is around the eye of a volcano. Therefore, the look right that you see very picturesque, beautiful, and it is known as also to be having the highest number of hot springs, right, and a lot of other things to its credit. So this beautiful space, and in 1920s again, around 1920s, during that time, the gray wolf, the government itself sanctioned extermination of gray wolf. So this particular animal was supposed to be killed at sight, because why? Less gray wolf meant more elk, more deer, more animals to be consumed by man, more meat. Therefore, the grey wolf was a predator, and therefore it has to be killed. So you can see there in 1920s there was a policy which sanctioned, the government sanctioned the killing of grey wolf in Yellowstone Natural Park. Thereafter, of course, it disappeared. And then what happened? What happened in the absence of this huge predator, right, was the growing population of the elk, and it grew so much. This deer sort of animal, it grew so much in population that it threatened the nearby agricultural lands, and it brought in this the coyote and the beaver and the antelopes and everything. The entire ecosystem was affected by the disappearance of the gray wolf. And it was only later in 1995 that the government, through the introduction of Endangered Species Act, decided to bring it back into the ecosystem. And this is a famous incident which has shaped again our attitude towards the environment, where the grey wolf was reintroduced. And guess what? The land, there was spring again, there was, the ecosystem balance was restored, and there was peace, or the healthy ecosystem was restored in Yellowstone Natural Park with the arrival of the grey wolf. So this is one part of it. Now, in this context, I have a little story to tell you about this gentleman called Aldo Leopold. Aldo Leopold was one of the young men at that time who was trigger happy and, of course, young and jaunty young man who was taking a walk through Yellowstone Natural Park when he chanced upon a pack of a movement in the grass. And when he saw this, he thought it must be fawn, it must be deer, and he was watching. And then he saw that it was a pack of wolves. The moment he saw that it was a pack of wolves, being trigger happy, sanctioned by the government, our young friend took out his rifle and emptied the bullet onto the pack of wolves. What happened later was that the entire pack was killed, leaving a molly, a little baby wolf, trying to hide itself for shelter. And the old wolf, apparently, says Aldo Leopold, when he walked up to this dying old wolf, it turned to him with green fire in its eyes. This, Leopold says, was such a defining moment that it eventually turned him into the philosopher, the scientist, the ecologist, the forester, the conservationist, and the environmentalist that he became. In fact, he has a land ethos or earth ethos which he brought out, which said that our primary duty as a species is to leave the land around us the way we found it. And here you can see that it is because we look at land or earth as a commodity that we tend to exploit it. If you believed and understood that it is a community of which we are also a part of, you'll deal with it with more respect. Now, this is in line with what Rachel Carson said earlier in her Silent Spring, where she expected us, the readers, to have look at nature with a sense of wonderment. And in one of the classes or videos that I was watching today, a professor described Rachel Carson's aim as to establish a sense of respect for our neighbors. who are our neighbors, the bees, the crows, the trees, the grass, and everything that cohabit this planet along with us. I come to when we discuss environment, we must understand that there's a lot that is never discussed. So here is something about the strain that you see towards towards the left is about a train that leaves Jodhpur and reaches Bathinda. It is notoriously called the cancer train. Why is it so called? The cancer train apparently carries victims of cancer due to the extensive use of pesticide from Punjab, seeking help cancer treatment in the Acharya Institute of Cancer and Research. So this is the extent to which pesticide has and continues to affect our biodiversity, our environment even today. On the right, what you see is a structure of endosulfan. The endosulfan tragedy that occurred was the spraying, aerial spraying of endosulfan in bordering districts of Karnataka and Kerala. Kasargod and some places in Karnataka has been so devastating that it has resulted in generations of children being born with deformed, physically deformed bodies. And the government has recently sanctioned some help, but the truth is there has been no reduction in the use of these very, very harmful pesticides. So it's no wonder that even today, most of the cleaning agents that we use at our home are mostly harmful to us, right? So that's why some people say the kitchen is the most poisonous of places. I'll move on now. And so, in lieu with what I said earlier, uh, as recently as in 2018, in order to exterminate mosquitoes, there was a drive of spraying DDT. The DDT, which was banned by John F. Kennedy in America post the release of Silent Spring in the year 1962. Somewhere after that, the DDT was banned. So that was the impact that this work had on the American rethinking of overuse of chemicals in daily life and the role of chemical industry. That the chemical industry continues to play a very menacing role in the lives of developed nations is something that we cannot ignore. I take you through this next slide where you see in the process of rethinking, we look at this group of politicians who are protesting against Guardian. And the Guardian report, which came out in 2011, as you can see here on the smaller slide photo, it asks for banning of many activities in the Western Ghats. Now, Western Ghats, as you can see, starting at Gujarat and ending till the tip of Kerala, is that natural land formation which protects and which also protects the landform and also impacts the climate. The monsoons have a lot to overlap to the Western Ghats. So the Gartal Commission and thereafter the Kasturi Rangan Commission asked for various changes in our approach towards Western Ghats, and immediately, just like it happened in America, Indian states refused to comply, and there were massive protests against the WG, Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel, which was led by Gadgil initially, and there was a revision by Kasturi Rangan, where the number of districts and number of villages which need to be evacuated and the area of the eco-sensitive zone was much reduced. Gadgil accused Kasturi Rangan of criminalizing his report because he said that his report of which asked for total ban of all kinds of man activities in the Western Hills, Western Ghat, is something that will alone ensure that it survives. To some extent today, some parts of southern states are willing to relook at Gadgil report, considering the devastation that the states are facing through prolonged and continuous floods and other natural calamities due to global warming, climatic changes, and land denudation, right, soil erosion, and various other related activities. Mining, for example, in Kerala, 700 quarries are permitted by the government. The number of quarries that are available in Kerala or are there in Kerala, according to media reports, is almost 3 to 4 times more than that. So imagine the kind of pressure it puts on a very eco-fragile landmass, which is just a small strip of land, and what it does to its ecology. Now, this is not just Kerala. You can take any state in our country. I think we have to rethink our construction, rethink our mode of transport, rethink our way of living, and rethink our connection, our relationship to environment. So, environmentalism in India. The environmentalism in India started from the layman's worry about his survival, his existence, whereas environmentalism in the West started with man's concern about protecting nature. So, this is an excerpt from Ramchandra Gupta's article in the Hindu about the difference between Western environmentalism and that in the Eastern countries. By the way, there are many indigenous practices that are embedded in our socio-cultural ethos, which are pro-environmental. However, because some of these are also have other layers of faith and practice and rituals, they do sometimes harm the environment more than protecting it. For example, the worship of the river. Now, anybody will agree that the rivers much worshipped in a country are dirtier than the rivers which are now worshipped around the world, right? Somebody said the Thames, which is never deified, is much cleaner and peaceful than the holy Ganges, which is deified in our country. So these are areas which are definitely controversial, but as a people, we need to really rethink our attitude towards nature and what impact we leave on the environment. So indigenous practices have been agreed upon today by science, like the Global Biodiversity Framework and the intergovernmental science policy makers have sanctioned or agreed upon the fact that community practices, cultural practices in Asia have to be encouraged and have to be promoted in order to ensure biodiversity because practices which are pro-environmental have to be promoted. With this, I come to my area of interest, which is the sacred grove. Now, what is a sacred grove? A sacred grove is a landmass which is untouched by public at large because of the faith that is attached to it. On the left is a sacred grove in Ghana, Nigeria. Sorry, it is called. I'll come back. Also Sacred Grove in Nigeria. To the right is the Sacred Grove in Japan, which is called Utaki, Utaki. So sacred groves is a global phenomenon found across the world, increasingly under threat today, but also they're the champions of protections of biodiversity. Some of the sacred groves that you can see here, the Irigul Kavu in Kerala, which is near Ernakulam, one of the largest sacred groves, which preserves its landmass, its trees, and its biodiversity in a without interference from the man. Of course, you are allowed to visit, but there's no permission to take away anything from the sacred grove. Trees that fall are allowed to rot. Leaves that fall are not cleaned or moved away. So the vegetation is natural, non-interference by man, except for the pavement or area that you can walk through. Why is sacred groves important? Because they are, as I said earlier, repositories of medicinal plants, repositories of biodiversity, and an example for that is this 200-year-old tree that was found in one of the sacred grove in Kerala, which was thought to be extinct. 200 years ago, it was thought to be extinct, and it was found in one of the sacred groves. That's a sacred grove in Ghana, and the Meghalaya Moflang sacred grove also. It has a 800-year-old history, and most of the sacred groves you will see, whether they are managed by families, managed by temple trusts, managed by the government, managed by various agencies, still have the nature of a long dated history, predated history. And why is it alive? It is alive mostly due to a certain belief in the ethos of the sacred grove. What works against is definitely the increasing demographic growth, that is, the demographic demands on land, commercialization of land because of the increasing demand by the population and our other commercial activities. So Morphlang Sacred Grove also has these rules. It is managed by the Khasi tribe, and again, various taboos ensure that it is in its pristine form. Again, I talked about the earlier the tree. You can see towards the left the Maduka diplostemon, which is also called in Malayalam Urakam Thungi. That's the name of the tree. And this tree was thought to be extinct. It has been only found twice. Once in 1835 by a British Raj biologist botanist called Robert Wright, and later now in Kollam. In the middle is another highly endangered species. You can see the name Drypatus pottery, which was again thought to be extinct and has been found in Villupuram district. And towards the end, you see a small picture that is of Andalur Kavu. I'll tell you an interesting story there. In the Andalur Kavu, Kavu is a Malayalam for sacred grove. This during my research, like Ma'am Sheena said, in my interaction with people, there are a lot of stories that come, and that is how I am able to share this. So thanks to Professor Uni Krishnan from Kaladi Sri Shankara College. So he told me about this practice where the people in that particular area do not use jackfruit until it is first used in the temple. So what happens? Jackfruits rot, they dry, they fall, they are useless, isn't it? But what is the benefit if you look at it? The benefit is that new plants sprout. Now, sacred flowers have received a lot of scientific validation, thanks, of course, to Madhav Gandhi in India and his guru, Vattar, together, who did this research on this practice and were surprised to see how patches of forest land remain even in towns and cities and amidst human occupied spaces. So the Scientific American hails this initiative. And what you see here is a picture of one of the sacred groves that I happen to visit. It is in Thrissur, district of Kerala. It is around 2 acres and 17 cents. And here again, you can see how the leaves are fallen, and there's no attempt to clean anything. And it is only visited once in a year for a very short time. Otherwise, you are not supposed to enter this place or pluck anything or take away anything. However, today, in the interest of science, these people have agreed to allow the entry of study tours and botanists who come. So forest officials, social forestry in Kerala has recognized through its Kerala State Forest Policy the sacred groves as a area, as a temple of biodiversity, and has taken the responsibility of supporting each sacred grove by giving saplings. And this many sacred grove owners and units which run them say that they are indeed happy to receive these and take care of abandoned sacred groves. Now, one thing that happens in Kerala is that lands which have sacred groves are not going into the other spiritual aspects of sacred groves, which we'll take up later. I just want to tell you about one of the indigenous practices in India that promotes environmental thinking. And support for sacred groves, honors in terms of finance, in terms of providing them saplings or advice from the agricultural university is taken up by the Kerala State Forest Policy. You'll be surprised if you go to the forestry website. I have studied the website of all states, and I must say the Kerala Forestry has done a good job in terms of listing the sacred groves per district. Every district, including the Google, coordinates, it has been mentioned, and that makes it easy to identify these are the spots of lungs of the city, lungs of the village, right? That is there. So documentation is going on, and there's an intensive study that is happening on the sacred groves. Again, these pictures, I'll tell you that the picture on the left is that of a sacred grove, again around 200, 300 years old. It is a small sacred grove that is in the measurement of 2 cent. 2 cent will be 8.71 square feet. Okay. And the other one is a larger one. It is of 25 cents. Right. So, and again, in both cases, entry is allowed only once in a year. So, socio-cultural environmentalism in India, which is rooted in tradition, which is rooted in practice, has many different interesting aspects. So, the lunar calendar has many stars to it, and there is some concept that the social forestry has introduced, which is called the Nakshatra Vana, and that means planting trees according to the star of the lunar calendar, the birth star of each person. Now, this is being encouraged on a massive scale today by the governments across state governments across the country. And definitely, it ensures in one of the sacred groves that I happen to visit, they have planted the Nakshatra Vana. In fact, two of them have done this, actually planted because they also have space and they receive the support from the social forestry. They have been able to plant planting trees of variety according to the lunar calendar doesn't matter. The fact is that so many trees are planted. So 27 trees and in various forms they have been arranged. Now, there are many other such practices in Kerala. One such is this Dasha Pushpam or during the month of Karkadaka, which comes in May, June during the rainy months in Kerala. This is Karkadakam is the name of the month, Malayalam month. Okay. Now, what happens is people are supposed to wear certain flowers, 10 medicinal flowers. Similarly, consumption of 10 medicinal leaves is encouraged during this time. So there are these practices which have been part of our living only probably because of the benefits to our health, benefits to the environment, also probably also to make us aware about the importance of preserving them. To some extent, my belief is that sanctity or sacred nature is assigned to these only to ensure that they survive out of faith. I'm not reading it. You can check up the word. Now, this is another interesting story from Pipilantri village. So, the Pipilantri village has been in news for various reasons. One important reason is uh, the panchayat senior who had a who lost his daughter decided to plant 111 trees in the memory of his daughter who passed away at a very young age. Ever since, the entire village community has adopted this practice, and today the Piplandri model is being promoted across the world as a flag bearer of ecofeminism because it celebrates the girl child and environmentalism. So these definitely are stories that should come. However, faith in India also, socio-cultural environmentalism also comes with its negative impact, and some is the acid burning of trees because trees obstruct view, trees obstruct this, that, and what you see here is somebody applying medicine to a tree which has been on which acid has been poured. So from where I'm speaking, even now the road approaching my area of work is being cleared of the trees because the road development is happening. So development and environmentalism, there's always a conflict. What you see is faith and how faith has contributed to the degradation of the ecosystem in the river Yamuna and the river Ganges, and it is time that we looked at our practices. There have been Indian environmentalists. What you here you see is Sundarlal Bakula, who are taking a leaf from the Bishnoi movement that happened earlier, where the Bishnois protested against the cutting of trees. I think again it was in the early 19th century, and they're taking a leaf from that experience. Sundarlal Bakula started what is called Chipko movement. I'm sure many of you have studied about that in the school. To the right, you see Vandana Shiva, a leading voice in ecofeminism across the globe, right? And she's also somebody known to preserve a seed bank. So she's promoting indigenous seeds. So there was a time when farmers used the seeds from their own crop, right? They would keep it aside and use it. And in comes MNC like Monsanto, which advises farmers to buy seeds from them. And Vandana Shiva's work is a lot about self sufficiency for agriculture and preserving these traditional practices of agriculture. You can look her up. She's a leading voice for ecofeminism. I'm just introducing a few people there. Sorry. So there are two people here. One is Salu Marada Timmaka. Let me tell you a little story about her. I was lucky to have her visit our university when I was into student affairs. She visited our university. This lady was, ostracized for not being able to bear a child. And somewhere in her life, she decided with her husband to adopt trees as a children. And what did she do? She adopted trees and decided to plant trees on the roadsides. She and her husband, as is common. She was vilified, she was teased, she was made fun of. But today, Salumarada Thimakka is also a winner of Padma Shri awardee. Is also made her way into the textbooks. And when she actually visited the university, I must say there was a huge, a sort of a spiritual aura about the place. So it is the work that she has done from this very illiterate, very simple woman who was, when she visited in 2019, she was 103 years old. But she walked in, she spoke to us, she spoke to all of us for around 20 minutes, and then she left the campus and leaving her blessings and advice for the youth, especially the students in the university, were very touched by her presence because they said, "Ma'am, we have studied about her in our textbook." On the other side, you see Rajesh Chauhan, who is the waterman of India, and his work has helped in reviving many of the water table in many places and how it has contributed. I'll just move on. Um, Native wisdom across the globe has stressed on protection of environment as something to be man as one among the nature, isn't it? So that is what we call speciesism. So that is what native wisdom always spoke about, and that is why you have the story of this famous Seattle chief Seattle, for to whom apparently a white man wanted him to sell land, and Chief Seattle, in a long letter, said that neither the earth nor the air is mine to sell. Who am I to sell? So here there's another thought like that. The earth does not belong to man, but man belongs to earth. Therefore, it is like the famous proverb of saying, we say that we borrow it from future, and therefore we have to preserve it and give it away. So this, I will close my presentation here, and I'm open to discussion. I hope there are areas that if anybody wants to share any thoughts about environment, here references of the reading that I did, and I want to thank you with a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, which says that Earth provides enough to satisfy everyone's need, but not for anyone's greed. So, the rest of the 10 minutes that we have, I would like you to engage in any sort of a discussion and any thoughts that anybody would like to share.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this wonderful session. Green, murder, environmental communication, indigenous practices are jargons which may have appeared in newspapers but was unaware of it. Thank you so much for bringing it to the limelight and brainstorming on these very important topics. I am aware that it is a very lovely audience and it's open for discussion. Anybody who would like to ask a question or tell about their own experiences in the indigenous practices they have engaged or they have seen in their cultures are welcome to do so. You can even put up your questions in the chat box. If you're a little reluctant to unmute and ask, I'll take up the questions on your behalf.
I'm expecting you to share practices which you have found around you, which you think are beneficial to environment, and how can we promote them. Let us have a quick sort of exchange of ideas about our attitude towards environment. When do we think about environment? At what point do we think about it? When the water from the pipe stops coming, we do think about water. Till then, we take it for granted, right? So let us have a discussion. I come from the city of Bangalore. Bangalore is known for its lake. However, the truth is today that the lakes have been encroached and there is a struggle. The biodiversity is increasingly affected, and this is resulting in various issues, whether it is lowering of immunity, whether it is health issues that is coming up due to it. So I want to you hear your thought about environmental activism around you. How can we promote more communication? What are practices that we can engage in order to promote environmental friendly thinking among generations? Yes,
Uh,
sir. Yeah, she.
Loken sir, please take up your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very nice and insightful presentation. Uh, I just want to ask you maybe your comments on it. What role environmental communication can actually play in bringing about behavioral change? Because I think that whatever efforts the society and government is putting, and without making a judgment on the kinds of efforts, I take it in a positive way that efforts are being made, although they are very small and we need to do a lot. But only thing that can save the environment and nature is behavioral change. Your last quote on Mahatma Gandhi, that earth has enough for everyone's need but not for anyone's greed. But greed is growing, and only because of various pressures that we have. So unless we bring in behavioral change, we will not be able to solve this problem or challenge of environmental degradation. How? What is the role and what is the capacity and strength of environmental communication you see, which can help us to bring that lifestyle change, behavioral change? This is my general question, and I just want to ask you also, because you talked about sacred groves, and I work in the area of climate change and wetlands. I'm in charge of the wetlands in Madhya Pradesh. Do you have any studies about sacred lakes and wetlands also? Because, like sacred groves, there are many sacred lakes and wetlands. So, any research, any comment on that would be I would be happy to hear
Right.
from you. Thank
I'll
you.
take the thank you so much for your question, sir. The second part, sacred wetlands or sacred lakes, is not something that, apart from some reading that I've done in part of my research in published papers, I really cannot say much about it. Uh, I cannot say about sacred sites or sacred lakes. But when you asked about the question about bringing about behavioral change, which I think exactly is the role that communication has to play, that is to bridge the gap between knowledge and action. So one of the leading concerns among the in the intellectual sphere or anywhere the policymakers is definitely from what I have read is the how do we bridge the gap between knowledge and action, and it is bridging the gap between knowledge to action that will bring about behavioral change. And what can environmental communication do? Environmental communication, when you talk about it, is definitely not something that has that stands in isolation. It comes from our daily interaction with nature. Now, let me, if I mean, I won't be wrong if I talk about Elena Ostrom theory of commons and how any property that is of common use is deteriorated and exploited by the community at large unless restrictions are put in place, and certain community practices like the sacred groves or the community farming or fish farming among certain communities, etc., follow certain forms of shared responsibilities. Now, the problem, as I see it today, is that our shift from surroundings and man's increasing isolation from nature, where the water in the river is dirty and the water in the pipe is sacred. The land outside or the dirt outside is dirty, and the land which is manicured is beautiful to us. So unless we have changed the concept of nature head on, and we need to change, we have to make a total revamp of this entire attitude, and we have to probably take youth if we want to a structural change in their behavior. It has to start right at the beginning. So we should, as parents, probably stop beautifying our land, whatever land we have, in especially in Kerala, in the wake of the floods that happened. One of the suggestions that came is to reduce tiling of the every single area of free land, tiling it up, because it reduces the porosity of mud, and therefore it increases the chances of flood. Now, this kind of engagement with nature from the childhood. See, as people, we are less socially aware. We are somehow, if I may say, a little insensitive towards our responsibilities. And this could be because of various reasons, because of how we are more concerned as a developing country. Our comforts come first to us. Probably the Western nations have already done the development, and that's why they are able to think about these so-called luxury like nature. Even then, it is not happening. So what can environmental communication do? Environmental communication has to start right at the beginning. It starts from the parent to child communication about nature, like the wilderness which was demonized, the grey wolves which was demonized as and something to be exterminated, something to be killed, and today it has been reintroduced, and that has brought a change in the value. Similarly, we have to understand the wilderness is not something to be conquered or destroyed, or and this change has to come through the society. It is difficult considering the demographic demands on land among us, considering that we are a poor country, a developing country. The demand for food production is very high. There is increasing conflict between man and nature because we want more land, and we are, capturing more and more land from the forest, etc. Still, it is important for us to set limits. It's important that rules and regulations are put in place. It is important that discussions like this happen at family level. We as a people have to move out of our family units and think our Indian society somehow is limited to the family. We rarely do have the concept of the society. We need to think about not just me, my father, my daughter, my unit. We have to think beyond and think about how does it impact the society, what is happening. If I throw the garbage from here to there, what am I doing really? Will the garbage come back to my water table? When I pour acid onto the land, bare land, because I'm manufacturing something, won't the water table get affected, or won't it percolate and destroy or affect the water quality somewhere else? These are questions that we should ask, and we have a system which is very porous. Our rules are not very strong. Implementation of these rules are not as effective as it should be. And as a people, we are resistant to rules and regulations. So it is a potpourri of various things. But where can we start? We should start at the school. We should definitely take our children to the fields, allow them to speak about nature. Uh, Entertainment has to move from malls to the riversides, from malls to the lakesides, and there should be a learning about natural geography around them. See, for me in Bangalore, in Kerala, learning about Qutub Minar did not make much sense. But for me, it was important to learn about the river next to my home or the lake next to my school. This is something I hope, this is a change that I'm expecting in communication and social studies, which will eventually benefit environmental communication and create an awareness about the local environment, because we are the guardians of, or of course, the earth doesn't need us as much as we need earth. Like that was what Vandana Shiva would say, right? Earth will survive, but we will not. So this is, I don't know if I've answered your question, sir, but this is what came to my mind.
Right. we need to be sensitive, and sensitivity and responsibility, as you said, definitely will take us a long way. Of course, the earth will survive without us, but if we become guardians of the galaxy, we will have a beautiful life. This life will be beautiful and we will all cherish it. I can see another hand being raised up. Ma'am, if you can take up that question. uh, Ma'am, am I audible? Tamarai, ma'am?
Yeah. Sure. Thank you so much. Srilekha ma'am, thank you so much for that beautiful presentation. And your interest in saving the environment is going to become a PhD thesis also. You were asking about the practices. I don't have a question, but I just would like to share this a small input. In Tamil Nadu, before any wedding, they used to do a kind of a puja for the neem tree and the people tree. So one is for oxygen and one is for health. So that is kind of a significance thing they used to do. And whenever any wedding, just before the wedding, they used to plant a tree called Odiyamaram in Tamil. I don't know in English. I'll find out and tell you later. So that tree will grow very fast. It's a very medicinal plant. So when the child is born, those times within 1 year you have to go for a child. For that child, they used to cut the tree and make the cradle and even the toys. So the child eats that, and even if it puts it in the mouth, nothing will happen. So like that, also that is one thing. Also, I came across, you were asking about any input. There is a person I know who is so much interested in developing this environmental thing and planting trees. Even for the soak pit, he has some ideas like how to what to say cleanse by growing the trees. You don't have to really have a drainage system connected to the main canal or something. So I can, if you are interested, I can put you through.
Sure.
So that will be my small contribution.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank you,
you.
ma'am. Thank you
Thank
so much for your sharing. Thank you so much, ma'am.
thank you.
As ma'am has shared a beautiful practice, I can see Rishika Pimpri writing something. And this is again a beautiful practice which she has mentioned, that each student during her school times were made to plant a sapling in the school premises on the birthday, on the particular child's birthday. And definitely, as she says, it was a very good practice to inculcate environmental values among the young children. We all agree with that, and more brainstorming needs to be done in that area. One question which comes to my mind is, ma'am, I find students, like we have a subject EVS, even in higher education, the first year, second years, but I find students taking this subject to be very light. They don't take much interest in it. They just take it as a foundation course, not even as a foundation course. It is just meant for them, okay, ek raat padhenge and we will pass the subject. So when you talk about insensitivity, I was just reminded of this incident wherein I see, although I don't take EVS as a subject, but I invigilate students, and I see that within half an hour they write the paper and go off. So this shows the lack of interest. And as Mahatma Gandhi in the quote has said, the earth has everything for one's need, but not for one's greed. And I think with the consumerism we are doing, and with the mall culture coming up with sale after sale, I think this is leading to more of consumerism. And as Lokin sir has rightly put it, we need to have this behavioral change, and input sessions like this on environmental communication, wherein we discuss at length on the indigenous practices. I hope that this would bridge the gap, the knowledge and the practice gap, and we would be in a position to bring about the behavioral change. But my question to you is, how do we bring about more student participation, relevant student participation in subjects like EVS?
Right. Ma'am, like I must tell you that I'm also guilty of this, because we used to have in our school times long back, we used to have a period called SUPW, which was meant for doing socially productive activity And let me tell you, the we used to call it some useful period wasted, right? Why? Because we were supposed to, I took farming, I remember, and I used to write lengthy notes on how the pit should be dug, how much centimeter, what should be, etc. But honestly, by God, we never did anything. Okay, I never touched mud. It took me a long time to realize, ma'am, because this is uh, life experiences teach us. We learn from what is happening in. So unless the learning is experiential, there will not be any change, substantial change. So unless this, again, when we talk of the youth at this age, they are more about the gadgets and about their Instagram pages. Unless we make environment something like a fashion statement. Cycling has become a fashion statement thanks to Corona, isn't it? And the cycle prices are shooting up the roof. Now, some rethinking, some repackaging of environment has to be done, because it is out of ignorance that this insensitivity comes. It is out of total ignorance. If I look at at myself as a student, it is out of total ignorance. Not indifference came out of ignorance, because I didn't realize what it would do to me. So unless we make the youth realize what impact it has to them about their life, we can have many more Greta Thunbergs in India who will actually question policies, who will ask about the state of the lake, and therefore they will also take interest in EVS. So this is absolutely because we do not know, we are not thinking, or we are not applying our mind and our educational system properly. We have to rethink, revamp, and make it more and more hands-on and experiential. Until we do that, I think the shift is difficult to happen. So it will be like me writing notes on the pit and the length and never doing any kind of agriculture until now, when I actually want to do something. I really want to do something, right? It
Right,
took such a
right.
long time.
And here I see Loken writing, Government of MP has issued an order saying that students will get their degrees only after they plant a tree. What a wonderful idea. So we need more of brainstorming like this. And as you rightly put, how cycling has become a fashion. So maybe environmental friendly practices can begin as a fashion statement, and it should catch on with the millennials, and we will definitely have more of Greta Thunbergs. I can see Shiba ma'am here in the group. Dr. Shiba Joseph is our IQAC coordinator, and as I told you, we hosted this program under the banner of Internal Quality Assurance Cell. Ma'am, may I request you to please share a few words? Ma'am, are you there? Shiba ma'am? Okay, by the time she's there, because I know it is a very busy day for her, because we were having convocation for the day. So, on behalf of the Internal Quality Assurance Cell, the Department of Education, and the Department of Commerce, a big thanks to you, ma'am, for a beautiful insight you have shared on environmental communication, indigenous practices, and the different topics, the unheard topics we have read, but then not much understood the crux of it. Thanks a lot for that insight into environmental communication. And thanks to the lovely audience for your patient listening, and for making this communication really worthwhile, because of your inputs on the practices you have understood from your lifetime, the different cultures you are into, and also how communication can keep going. It can never happen one way, it has to be both ways. And thank you for the lovely audience for being there. So BSS will always march forward, because we march forward towards a better world. We will host programs like this, and we would always want audience like this to be encouraging us to join us and to encourage us for taking up more activities like this. Thank you so much, ma'am. So on this beautiful note, we sign off. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.